everybody. Thank you so much. I'm out. Oh, thank you so much for coming in tonight, and thank you for tuning in live. We are here at Kings Leaf Cigar. It's a lounge in Charleston, South Carolina, and I came all the way from Alaska to be here with my good friend, Dr. Mervin Jenkins, who I met about 4 years ago in Philly. And we were instant friends. I want to thank everybody here at Kings Leaf for letting us be here, and just everybody who's joined us. Some of you know, a couple of months ago, Merv called me up and he's like, "Hey, I want you to hear my story." And I didn't even know that he was writing a book. And so he started telling me his story. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. What? This is awesome. And we started thinking about like, how could we, promote it once it came out? Because I knew it was going to be an amazing story. And so he told me that he had written most of his story here at the Cigar Lounge. And I was like, that would be the perfect place to have a book signing. And so, and actually last month we had a live stream where we had a book chat, but this is even more special because we're here on location. So congratulations, Dr. Jenkins, for your newest release, because you have 2 books. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask him some questions, and then there's going to be time if you want to ask him some questions also. But yeah, and first I'm going to read a little bit of the foreword by Rose Rock, and we'll talk about that. She writes, "From our first meeting, I was moved by the spirit and passion he had for his dreams of becoming a famous rapper. This was at a time when many people in mainstream America still questioned if rap was really music. But Mervin's intellect combined with his natural charisma reminded me of qualities I saw in my own son, Chris, when he was just starting out on his own journey into comedy. I watched Mervin throughout the years as he grew both as a person and a recording artist. My role in his life was at times a counselor and confidant, then as a coach and mentor, and finally as a dear friend and second mother. Mervin's mother was a teacher, and as an educator myself, I knew that I had to encourage him to stay in school and to complete the task of graduating with his degree. But I never dreamed that Mervin would dedicate the next 20 years of his life pursuing further education for himself and becoming an educator in his own right. Over the years, I watched with pride as Mervin became a teacher, then an assistant principal, and then a principal in a predominantly white community. I saw how he navigated the challenges of working in a system that was not always welcoming to people of color, and how he persevered with grace and determination. I was thrilled when he went on to serve in leadership positions for educational nonprofits and organizations with missions dedicated to encouraging and supporting the hopes and dreams of our youth. But what I admire most about Mervin is that he never gave up on his passion for music. Even as he worked tirelessly in the field of education, he continued to write and perform his own music, never losing sight of the dream that inspired him from the beginning. And with that, we open Mervin's newest book, To the Beat of Leadership, A Story of High and Low Notes. And so my first question, Dr. Jenkins, is what does it mean? Why did you decide to ask Rose to write your foreword, and what does that mean to you?
So it's funny, but everybody needs second, third, fourth, and fifth moms in their lives. And I've been fortunate to have just that many. Obviously, Mama Rock, Rose Rock, celebrity mom. She's Chris Rock's mother, and most people know her as Chris Rock's mom. But really, her story is so amazing. And I fell in love with one of her kids, Brian Rock, one of my best friends. And she adopted me. She took me in. And thanks to her love and grace, there's been a lot of guidance over the years. And again, she's not the only one. I actually have one who showed up tonight, Mama Green. Mama Green, raise your hand. All right. Yeah, y'all give it up. And honestly, these were people that wanted to see you do well in life. And everybody needs that in your life. You need that person that's going to be a cheerleader and that's going to nudge you to do the right thing. And even when you're doing the right thing, sometimes you feel like giving up. You need them to say, keep going. And I was fortunate to have those kind of people around me.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. My next question is, like around page 35, you start your story with the mysticism that started in your hometown of Utahville. And I'm just wondering, why did you begin to start there, and what is one of your favorite stories?
So let's start with the favorite story. And I didn't bring my glasses, so forgive me, folks. Well, actually, I got them, but I should have had them on. The supernatural was synonymous with my hometown and its history nearby Utah Springs. It happened to be where a less famous battle took place during the Civil War. The original inhabitants of this region were Native American tribe called Catawba. The name Utah is actually the Catawba word for pine trees, of which there were many in Utahville. The town's elders still knew that there were prominent plantations and where they once stood in the town. You didn't have to look to find someone to spin you a tale of deception and deceit, or one of pain and suffering. These are the things that energize the supernatural elements around us. My dad will tell anyone that when he was a small boy, something would always spook you if you roamed the dirt roads of Utahville after dark. He claims that one of his older brothers was born with a veil over his eyes, and as a result, had an innate ability to see dead people. I had the pleasure of hearing many of these stories told by that very same uncle who is now deceased. This one begins after a long evening of partying down in Utah Springs, and my uncle walked home. His friends who he traveled with, they were each breaking off at the dirt road intersection that took them to their respective residences. My uncle was the last and lived the furthest out in the direction everyone was headed. Eventually, he found himself at the last stretch of the road walking alone. It was a clear night, and the moon offered a sharp glow, good enough to illuminate the dirt road nearly 30 feet ahead. It was about that far away in the direction he was headed that my uncle noticed a single brown paper bag standing in the road with canned goods and other items inside of it. My uncle initially thought this was one of the neighbor's children. They must have unknowingly dropped a bag of groceries on their way home from the store before dark. As he reached down to pick up the bag, right before his eye, it transformed into a small old woman sitting in a white dress with her arms wrapped around her knees. The apparition's facial expression slowly turned from a resting state into a twisted snare. Totally caught off guard by the sudden change of events, my uncle leaped backwards, pulled the 22 caliber pistol from his pocket, and began firing at the apparition. Surprisingly, his firearm failed, only producing rapid ticks each time he pulled the trigger. As the barrel spun, he described or decided his only option was now to run. Having already taken a giant leap backwards and knowing his only way home was forward, he ran roughly a quarter mile ahead, full tilt, jumping over the old lady and reaching his mom's home. Once he was there, he walked out on the back porch, pointed the firearm in the sky, and shot off several rounds. This, honestly, was the kind of stories that I heard all the time and from all of my family members. So Utahville, like the Low Country itself, is very deep in both spiritual and the supernatural. And it was kind of hard to tell the story and not include some of that because, again, I remember plenty of nights after going to my grandmother's place, I was afraid to walk home and let alone sleep by myself that night. So I had to throw a few of those stories in. And if you read the book, you'll see there's a few more woven into the fabric of the whole piece.
Yes. Yes. Oh, and those stories are a little bit creepy. So, but they're good. They're really good. So starting around page 119, you share how you developed your ability to freestyle as a middle schooler who was standing up to a bully. So I want to know, what did it mean to you as a young man and to be able to freestyle, and how has that changed you, and how do you feel about your ability now as a grown man?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll just talk about that a little bit. First of all, to all the people who have young people, who lead young people, teach, every child has something that needs to be tapped into. And for me, that's what it was. When I was in school, I wasn't connected to the work. It wasn't relevant to me. But I did go to school every day looking forward to engaging in hip-hop music with my friends. And that became the why for me. Now, eventually, I found out that not only writing the music, but being able to produce it on the spot was a God-given gift that I found out by accident. And once I tapped into that, honestly, Mel, it was no looking back. I mean, I've been doing this since around 1983. And even today, as I travel the country working with young people, I can walk into pretty much any classroom, and within 5 minutes of introducing myself and talking or either performing, we got a pretty good rapport happening.
For sure. And I gotta say, like, whenever both of us are at conferences, and when you do your freestyle, and he just starts pulling things out. When you say like my name, I always feel so special. I love it. So, and are you going to show us some of this in a little bit? Your freestyle?
We'll probably catch a little bit after the wine and dine.
Yeah, why they call you Spectac and all that?
Okay.
Okay.
We'll do it.
All right. So around pages 109, you share your story of being arrested, where most people are like trying to keep that hidden and don't want other people to find out. But you put that in there, and you share about how it changed the trajectory of your life. And so I'm curious if you would share that story with us.
Woo. All right, Mama Green, have you read the book yet? Okay, all right. Well, you'll love this one. So, Chiffon, let me pause a second. I hope I got some glasses here because I'm struggling without these glasses. Hold on.
Is it in your bag?
Yeah, I hope. Yep. All right, much better. All right. So one weekend, Geechee, another member of the group, and I stayed up late Friday night smoking. We were rolling blunts, puffing on my signature Black and Mild cigars. B-Rock still jokingly says if Black and Mild knew how I had introduced their brand to the greater world, I'd be a millionaire 3 times over. But that's a story for another chapter of the book, or as a matter of fact, maybe another book entirely. So on this particular Saturday night, one of the members of the Shadowrunners crew, his nephew Kurt, and Geechee and I rode to Kroger, a grocery store in the area. This particular area of Columbia, where the grocery store was located, had a reputation for discrimination towards people of color. I needed another pack of Black and Mild cigars and a box of cereal. It was late in the night, and it was the closest store where I could grab those things and get back to campus quickly. Once we arrived at the grocery store, I exited the car and left the other fellows hanging around on the outside in the store parking lot. I quickly found the smoking section, grabbed a box of cigars, slid them into my sweatpants pocket. After a quick shoplifting spree, I strolled to the cereal aisle and scooped up a box of Captain Crunch with the berries in them. As I grabbed the box from the shelf, I noticed a Hispanic male looking at me from the other end of the aisle. He seemed to be in his early 30s, and he wore an Adidas sweatsuit. Everything about the gentleman screamed cool, except for the walkie-talkie in his hand. By now, I knew there was a good chance he was an undercover cop. So I turned and zigzagged my way back to the cashier. The man followed my every turn, which only further supported my theory that he was an undercover policeman. Now at the register, I pulled out a $100 bill to pay for the cereal while keeping the pack of cigars in my pocket. Along with the cash, I also had a $100 check my mom had sent me to help buy what I needed. Still, with the man in the sweatsuit watching, I bought the almost $4 box of cereal and stole the 69-cent pack of cigars. As I exited the grocery store, the man in the sweatsuit wasn't far behind. I could see him from my peripheral, communicating on the walkie-talkie I had seen him with. Geechee was on the payphone outside, and I yelled to him, "Let's go, man. I think 5-0's trailing me." I stole some cigars. Geechee and Kurt's nephew both quickly got into my Nissan Datsun and waited for me to enter the driver's side to get us out of there. When I got in the driver's door, the man with the sweatsuit, on my blind side, I threw the pack of cigars under the car in the same motion while opening the door. I quickly cranked the car, put it in reverse. As I put my foot on the gas, I heard, "Police, shut off the car and put your hands where I can see them." The Hispanic man's voice, although quite loud, was not too intimidating. However, the firearm he had pointed directly towards me was. Geechee Raw started whispering, "What did you do with the cigars?" I told him I threw them under the car. Geechee responded, "Oh, you're good, man. Just don't admit you know where they are. You're good." I turned off the car at that point, and the man commanded me to exit the vehicle. He asked, "Give me the pack of cigars you stole. Don't lie to me. Just give me the cigar," with the gun still pointed at me. I initially said I didn't know what he was talking about. I saw the look of disappointment in his eye. The look, oddly enough, gave me a sense of safety. Even with the gun drawn on me, I felt the right thing to do was come clean. I could still hear Geechee saying, "Spec, don't do nothing, man," coming from the passenger side of the car. I didn't take Geechee's advice this time. I told the officer I had thrown the pack of cigars under the car. While I retrieved the cigars, which he had asked me to do, the officer returned his firearm to his concealed holster. I handed him the cigars and he shook his head in disgust for my not being straightforward with him. Then he asked me why. I saw you pay for the cereal with cash, and you stole this. Why? I told him I was a college student and I just wasn't thinking. I told him that my buddies and I had attended Benedict and I was an education major. He grew more relaxed as I continued to explain my case. I watched his position shift more and more to a mentor role over the next few minutes. Eventually, as he was saying something along the lines of, I tell you what, his comment was cut into like a samurai sword by a loud siren of a police car swinging right up close to where we were standing. The officer who exited the car came out talking like he knew what that arresting officer was about to do. The second officer, an elderly white man, said, "Oh no, not tonight, Eldada. We're taking this one in." I knew it was going to happen as soon as I saw him step out of the car. To be honest, my appearance didn't help the situation. At this point, I had been growing my dreadlocks for a couple of years. They were almost shoulder length. I wore blue jeans hanging off my rear end, Timberland boots, and I'm sure I was wearing a t-shirt that complemented the rest of my outfit. Seconds later, I was cuffed, read my rights, and placed in the squad car. I remember Geechee asking the arresting officer if he could go spend the night with me in jail since it was my first time being arrested. I'll never forget that. I mean, who does that? The officers both thought it was funny and admitted that at first they had never heard of such a request. The older officer finally said to Geechee, "Well, if you were to assault one of us, we could take you with them." Somehow it felt like a setup, and thank God Geechee didn't fall for it. Instead, he just laughed it off and asked about picking me up later. While Geechee and my other friend drove my car back to campus, I was taken to an area holding cell. Officer Eldada met me there, and we continued our conversation one-on-one. He had collected enough information to know I wasn't the image I portrayed. Basically, the guy he saw and the one he was speaking with were two entirely different people. He even tried calling the local judge to see if I could get released that same night and just show up on my court date. Keep in mind now, it's around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. While Officer Eldada was at his desk trying to make the calls to help as best he could, I got approached by a small group of 3 or 4 officers. Each one of them were white men, and they were staring at me like an animal in a cage. One of them finally broke his silence and said, "Hey boy, is that hair real?" "Yes, sir," I responded. I remember explaining to them how I washed it and some other small talk before Officer Eldada returned. He told me that he was not able to get the judge, so unfortunately I'd be spending the rest of the weekend in the county jail. He actually apologized to me and said exactly what I was thinking earlier. I made you out to be someone else," he said, as he went on, and to promise that he would show up on the court date to tell the judge how I deserved another chance. That felt comforting.
That is an amazing story. I'm curious, have you talked to Officer Eldada?
Nope. I tried to look him up online and call different precincts over the years. I haven't lately, but I would say about 10 years ago, I really tried hard to find him. I would think he's retired now, but hopefully he's still around and doing good work. Yeah. And Mel, I got to share with the audience probably another piece in the book, but just real quick. My dad told me when I was a little boy, "Son, if you ever get arrested, don't call me." And I remember when I got that one phone call from jail, I was dialing the number and I thought to myself, "God, please let my mama answer the phone." And when the phone was answered, it was my dad. And I'll never forget, he must have heard the anxiety in my voice, nervousness. And I said, "Dad, I need to talk to mama." And of course he says, "What's going on?" And I paused for a second and I said, "Dad, I'm in jail." I would say it was probably 3 seconds later, I got the dial tone back. My dad hung up the phone. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask where I was. And I would have gotten out that same day, but instead I sat 2 or 3 days in jail. And it wasn't until he and mom were sitting on the porch one evening, and my mom said, "Melvin, Mervin usually calls every other day. I hadn't heard from him in a few days. You heard from him?" And he looked at my mom and said, "Yeah." And she said, oh, he's okay? He said, I guess so. He's in. Check, check. Oh, no. Check, check. Oh. Testing. He said, I guess so. He's in jail. And that's when my mom flew up to Columbia and got me out that day. But quite frankly, after those 2 or 3 days, I made my mind up that I wouldn't want to be trying that again. So tough love.
Yeah. So let's talk more about second chances.
Check.
Yeah. On page 59, you begin to tell a story of how that helped you relate to students, and it's a really powerful story, so I hope that you'll share it with us.
All right, this one I usually get a little choked up on, so you guys bear with me here. I was an administrator at the high school, and it happened to be the first week students were on campus. As part of freshman orientation, my peers had decided we would each take turns leading sessions with a cohort of incoming ninth graders. My role was to have them review disciplinary codes and various outcomes for each infraction. I thought it would be cool to have each student take turns doing a popcorn-style reading of each paragraph in that chapter. All was going as planned until it was time for one particular student to read. The young man was standing over 6 feet tall with huge shoulders and a medium build and stood silently. He avoided making eye contact with me or any of his fellow classmates. Automatically taking it as disrespect aimed at me as a school administrator, I spoke firmly. Excuse me, can you please read the next paragraph? Still, the young man stood there showing little emotion or concern that I was addressing him directly. I proceeded to ask him the same thing several times, announcing it louder each time until he made eye contact with me and said, you read the effing paragraph. As you can probably imagine, there was a loud gasp from the entire group, quickly followed by laughter. I was certainly embarrassed, but bought myself a couple of minutes to think by asking another student to pick up reading the next paragraph. As that student read aloud, my mind raced to when should I call the school's resource officer to take this disobedient student away. Suddenly, the next thought nearly knocked me off my feet. It occurred to me, just maybe, the student was reading below grade level and simply was trying to avoid having to read in front of his peers. For a very brief moment, I realized I was teetering near a place of that middle school teacher shouting out to me, you dingbat, dumb doorknob boy, when I was a student. That situation and others similar actually drove me to want to give students a different experience than the one I had. Yet here I was, failing at doing what I sought out to accomplish as an educator. When the session ended and students were dismissed, I kindly approached the student who was now disappointedly walking away and whispered, hey, let me talk to you for a second. I spoke very gently as I looked him in the eye and said, first, let me apologize to you. I should not have put you on the spot in front of your friends like that. I want to ask you something, and I hope you feel okay being honest with me in your answer. Are you having a difficult time reading? The student looked down and nodded his head in agreement. Needless to say, my heart broke. I did not intend to, but subconsciously, I was the bully. To think I was even at the point of radioing the school's resource officer, and who knows what turn of events would have occurred then. We see this play out all the time, and sadly, it is usually the student involved who ends up being the person who had done wrong. What if the student had gotten into an altercation with the officer? What if the officer, as a result, had responded with force? In the end, it would have simply read that the student disobeyed a school administrator and fought the responding officer. End of a story and the beginning of a life and one of societal failure after another, and one societal failure after another for this young man. I'm happy to say that after that conversation with the student, I apologized again for my stupidity and quickly introduced him to a counselor at the school I had the utmost respect for. She took that young man under her wings and made sure he was surrounded by a team of teachers that were ready and willing to see him succeed in his new role as a high school freshman. Even the student and I became close over time. In what seemed to be a situation headed for chaos, the student had instead presented me with a sword in the stone moment, and it is one that I will never forget. All right.
Wow. Well, I just want to say that not only is it powerful to give second chances, but to be able to humble yourself and admit that you were wrong and apologize to students. And, we've both been in education and that doesn't always happen. So I respect you so much. And just, a lot of the stuff that you share in here, I mean, most of us wouldn't admit to other people, but I'm so glad you did because you are a leader that I truly respect.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So this part, if anybody else has a question that would like to ask, we can give you the mic. We're just going to have a question and answer time. So if there's something that you'd like to know about the book or about his ability to lead, we would love to hear it. And then hopefully you'll freestyle for us.
Look at that.
Yeah? You have a
Shout
question?
it out. What's up, Jerome?
So everyone's being shy. Let me ask you a question. Everyone's being so shy.
So, Dr. Jenkins, have you found or have you seen that the way your teaching style is through hip hop has truly inspired kids to really grasp education and pursue further?
Great question and spoken like a true psychologist. Dr. Darren Perry, absolutely. One of the first things, when I started teaching back in 1997, it was here in Charleston County Schools. I did my school administrator work in North Carolina, most of it. But when I started here in Charleston, I asked my principal, could I start a program called Ain't Nothing Like Hip Hop Music? And with that program, I was able to do some pretty amazing things with students and connecting the dots with the work that we were doing. First of all, I was an art teacher. So doing the similarities between hip hop artists and your more traditional painters and people who drew, like there was such a strong connection that kids never had made for them. And one example I remember was talking about the late Tupac Shakur and explaining to children that there was a Renaissance artist, Raphael Sanzio, who lived a lifestyle like Tupac. Raphael Sanzio loved the nightlife. He was always dressed flamboyant, and he loved being in the social circles. So when it came time for kids to take their tests, and I would ask the question, I would pose it, who was the Renaissance artist that reminded or was very similar to Tupac Shakur in the lifestyle, then kids could automatically draw that connection and say, oh yeah, I remember that's Raphael, and there were other similar scenarios where you can make those comparisons. And yes, it made it stick for students. And that's what we miss is students need things that are going to stick for them. And you have to do the work that's relevant to what they're learning and just what's around them. A lot of times we miss the bus because we don't connect the bridge. So we have to stay involved. We have to stay involved. So yes, the answer is I have seen many situations where hip hop music has been used to bring kids in and to teach them whatever needs to be taught. But just remember, you have to capture the hearts of the students and the minds will follow.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Or just, there's a little button on the side.
The last episode you just read, do you know whatever happened to the last student?
Wow. That's a great question. By the time he graduated high school, and he did graduate high school, I was already a principal in a neighboring county in North Carolina. After graduation, I didn't keep in contact, so I'm not sure. But I will say this, man, and that's a great question, is sometimes we have to let students take the lead, and you'll find that they will inspire us to want to be better at who we are as human beings. They'll inspire us to want to see more. And just piggybacking off of that story, when my wife and I left North Carolina to move to Atlanta, Georgia, I had a student reach out on Facebook. He was a Navy man. He was over in Europe, serving in the Navy, Italy to be exact. And he wrote me on Facebook and he said, Mr. Jenkins, I know it's been a long time. You were my middle school art teacher. And you used to tell us about the Sistine Chapel. And the stories were so vivid that I'm actually visiting it now. And just being here and remembering your stories, it's just like you told us. So with the tear in my eye reading that, I looked at my wife and I said, man, we ain't never been to the Sistine Chapel. So needless to say, I think it was the 40th birthday, we went to see the Sistine Chapel, but inspired by a student. So how crazy is that? And that's the magic of having them come back or even you going back to them. Great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Raise your hands. We're going to get you a mic. All right, we got one here.
All right. And are you going to write another book?
I just wanted to know, I know that you've been rapping for a very long time and everything like that, but what was the specific moment where you decided I wanted to take, my passion that I love and educate students?
That's a great question. I fought my mom tooth and nail about going into the music business. I think it's in the book, but there's a part where I graduate high school and I want to go to New York City to be a rapper. I got an aunt in New York who's living out in Far Rockaway, Queens. I've already spoken to her. She's like, come on up, you can live with me and get a little job. And I was ready to go. And my mom was adamant that I was not going to New York, to the point that like literally a week or so before I was supposed to leave, she walked into my room and told me, Mervin, I've given this a lot of thought. You're not going to New York. I remember I was punching the wall, screaming, and I finally got slick. And I said to her, Mom, you know what? You want me to just hang out in the corner like your brother did and end up dead like him? I said, why don't you let me go to New York? And if it doesn't work out, after a year, I'll come back and do whatever you want me to do. That was a low blow, first of all, throwing the dead brother in there, but I was trying to hit Mom where it hurt because I was hurt. She looked at me and she says, you're telling me if you had applied to college like all your friends did, you and I wouldn't be having this argument right now and you'd be going to college and not bother me about New York City. I said, absolutely right. She said, I'm gonna ask you one more time. If you had applied to college, you would be doing that and not going to New York City. I said, yes, ma'am, but I didn't apply, so let me go to New York, and if it doesn't work out, I'll be back. Now, in my mind, I was thinking, if I get to New York, you might not never see me again. My mom reached behind her back. She pulled out 2 envelopes. She handed both of them to me. They were addressed to me. I tore open the first one. It said, Dear Mervin Jenkins, thank you for applying to South Carolina State University. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. And I tore the second one open, and it read almost identically. Thank you for applying to Benedict College. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. And I looked at my mom and I said, I didn't apply to college. And she smiled back and said, I applied for you. And real talk, when I became high school assistant principal, I took the drive back from North Carolina down to Utahville just to tell my mom, thank you for saving my life. Great question.
Yeah, mic check one. I'm loud anyway.
Go for it, Hal.
All right. Respect, King. I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud to have you in my network. Motivated souls do amazing things. When you look at the energy of touching souls, it tells you that the circle of life is endless. So you spoke on the sergeant, and when you kept with the stories about touching souls. So you have touched many souls, and I empower you to do more. So the power of the village, man, we expand your territory. So I'm excited. I think my question is where do you go from here?
Yeah.
Woo. Hal, so yeah, thank you, Hal, man, thank you. The question, where do you go from here? Folks, quite frankly, I know I'm gonna always be working with young people, Hal, and the only thing I have yet to do is to take the leap of faith and do it as a business that I'm running.
So I'm gonna say to you as a serial entrepreneur, the only way to live life is to test drive all dreams.
Yeah.
You hear the dream, go test drive, bro.
Yeah.
There it is. The only way to live life, test drive all dreams. Thank you, Hal. Thank you.
I have a question for you. So I'm curious, like, did you consider yourself like a writer, an author? Was this something that you thought many years ago you couldn't do? And is it something that now you just want to do all the time?
I've always loved writing. I started drawing. That turned into poetry. Shout out to Mom. You know, she released a book last year, a book of poems. I think seeing my mom like just go to work definitely put the fire up under me, because it's something I've always thought about, and I just made excuses like I was too busy to do it. And finally, I realized.
Oh yeah.
My wife nudged. She honestly really did nudge. I mean, like, that's like even making my skin crawl now, because she really was like hammering to the point I was like, I'm gonna do it. Chill out. And yeah. So woo, that's what I got. I'm just saying. Love you.
That's awesome.
Check.
Thank you, Chiffon. You did a good job. Does anybody else have any questions?
You were talking, Dr. Johnson. That was the question 2 questions ago. But that's all right. Come in. This must be the wine. All right. Hey, before we wrap it up, I know there's a lot of faces here. Any questions before we turn this thing into a little chill out party? Lamont, I'm a little afraid to give everybody a freestyle sample because these mics keep going in and out.
I have a microphone.
Definitely not that one, man. Definitely not. Doc.
It's long.
So, the people of Kings Leaf Lounge want to know, when did you stop blacking miles and get to a real cigar?
Good question.
Nice plugs for the folks at Kings Leaf. When I left North Carolina to move to Atlanta, I found the cigar shops in the area, and I would go in and I would have like maybe a Black and Mild or some flavored cigar. And I got cool with a group of guys. We're still good friends to this day. And one day we all lit up. And when I lit up, one guy looked over and said, "Merv, when you gonna get off those training wheels, man?" And I tried a quote unquote real cigar. So that's been a very long time ago, Paula, but here we are.
Awesome.
All right.
I got one more thing to say.
Go.
All right. You publish this you kind of self-publish this live through music. Yep. So one thing I always encourage, I do a book chat almost every week, and I just encourage people that if you really want to support the people that you love that write, make a review. And almost all of you will probably take home Mervin's book tonight. And so after you read it, take a picture of yourself and go on Amazon and make a 5-star review, because that really does help him, his book get up there and to people, they'll see it. So that's my last bit. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everybody that was tuning in live. This was an amazing chat, and I love your book, and I love you. Congratulations.
You too, thank you. All right. I'm gonna need a volunteer that I don't know. It makes it that much better.
Do you want me to continue this online?
Doesn't matter. Totally up to you.
Well,
I'll probably be standing